I'm not very good at microphones, so we'll see how this goes. So welcome. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Valerie Ortiz. I'm the assistant planner in Stow. I'm here today with Kathy Sfera, our conservation coordinator, and also Jesse Stedman, the town planner, will be speaking. So we're holding this forum tonight to begin a planning process around the residentially zoned golf courses in Stow and to collaborate on a menu of options for future land uses at those sites, working with the owners of the courses to develop a shared community vision. Tonight we'd like to establish a common baseline of knowledge around the golf course properties. This is our first public forum for considering and visualizing development options. So we're aiming to come away from this with a better understanding of your interests and your concerns. So I'll clarify some next steps tonight and also how this planning process will continue after tonight. Here's our agenda for the evening. So we're going to, again, first put the golf courses in context, discuss their physical characteristics, their currently allowed uses through zoning, and how they connect to established planning efforts and opportunities in town. And that will include potential development scenarios as well as planning considerations. So the second half of tonight, we're going to have 4 different stations around this room of visualizing activities so that we can, again, hear comments from you. So facilitators at these stations will guide you through a series of questions that we can hear what you may want to preserve or change about the sites that we're talking about tonight, what concerns you may have, and what you might want to improve in Stow. And then after that, we'll come back together as a large group and quickly debrief what was heard tonight and again, go over any next steps. So moving right into it, these are our 4 golf courses in town. This is segmented by zoning district. So along Harvard Road in the Conservation Recreation District is Wedgwood Pines. Along the southeastern side of town is Stowaway Golf Club along White Pond Road in the Commercial District. And then right in the middle of Stow, there are 2 golf courses, Stow Acres and Butternut Farm, that are right in our residentially zoned areas. So Stow Acres and Butternut provide over 400 acres of open space right in the heart of Stow. So they're bounded by Wheeler Pond to the north and the Assabet River to the south. And on the east and west, there's Harvard Road as well as Route 62 or Gleasondale Road. And this is a map showing our primary conservation areas, so a map of site restrictions here. We'll get more into this later. I know you can't read the legend, so Kathy Sfera is going to talk a little bit more about those site restrictions, and we can always discuss this more afterwards or in one of the activities. It's just basically to show you what kinds of restrictions we're talking about here. So floodplains, contour lines, those types of things. So a few months back, town boards and committees got together to do a preliminary discussion about this planning process. And one of the questions that came about from that was, what are these lands in chapter, and what might that mean? How much might those lands be worth? So this is to briefly touch on that question. So again, Chapter 61, for those that don't know, again, we'll talk more about this in a moment, but it's a tax deferment program for lands that are held in open space or recreation. So this is relevant because the town has the right of first refusal when the lands might come up for sale. So essentially, the town would have the choice of whether or not to purchase the lands. So this has come up over the years through town meeting when residents are able to vote on different types of projects, for example, affordable housing or conservation projects. So here we have the unclassified values of the land for the 3 courses for 2019. So they're unclassified, so if they were not under Chapter 61, what are they worth? And so here we're seeing that they're worth a combined over $6.5 million. So here I'll pass it off to Kathy Sfera, who's going to take us through a virtual tour of the 3 courses that we're talking about tonight.
Thanks, Valerie. So I have the job of leading you all on a virtual site visit to the 3 golf courses so that you can see them in a way that you don't see them from the road. And I'm going to have this hopefully not be too much of a roller coaster ride because I get motion sick, so I'm sensitive to other people's. I wonder if the lights could come down just a tiny bit. Does that work for Stow TV? All right. So here we are kind of above all of the golf courses, as you might see them from the air. And what we're going to do is a little tour of the 3 golf courses, starting with the south course at Stow Acres. This is going to be your drone view. And this is just using Google Earth. So this is above the former Randall House and the clubhouse at Stow Acres. We're going to head south along the golf course, parallel to Randall Road, parallel to Gleasondale Road, and slowly make our way southward to the Assabet River, which you'll see in a moment. So we're here at the river. And then zooming out, you can kind of see a view of Gleasondale and the mill and the farm down in Gleasondale from the river. And then also a view out over a very large wetland system that abuts the Assabet River. Coming back around, and the property line is shown in red, coming back around to Randall Road. And then zooming along the Randall Road frontage, which is what you would see if you were traveling east on Randall Road, past the intersection of Randall and Edson Street, past the driving range, and back around to where we started. That's kind of an overview of the south course. You can see that there's a river system that bisects the south course, just sort of right of center, and heads down to the Assabet River. Now we're going to spin around, for those of you who don't want to do that, don't know. And we're going to take a tour of the north course and of Butternut. So starting up above Randall Road here, we're going to travel along Route 62, parallel to 62, to the line that separates Stow Acres from Butternut, continuing along 62 and all that long frontage that Butternut has, and continuing further along 62. To Wheeler Road. I'm going to turn down Wheeler. To where we are above the clubhouse for Butternut, looking out over the long expanse of Wheeler Pond and Elizabeth Brook. And then we're just going to travel up the shoreline of the pond here. You can see that there's extensive golf course frontage on Wheeler Pond and Elizabeth Brook. Spindle Hill Conservation Area just off the map to the right. And then looking back toward Randall Road, there's this beautiful spruce bog that's the dark spot in the top right of the screen, just off the property. Headed back over the driving range. And up to where we started. And all that, there'll be a quiz. All right. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about zoning. All right. What we wanted to do in the next part of the presentation is to give you a sense of what's allowed by current zoning on the residentially zoned golf courses, as well as a range of other possibilities which are not currently allowed by zoning, but which could be allowed if the town wanted to change the zoning to allow them. And I should say we've chosen the south course of Stow Acres for the purpose of these examples. And I'm going to show you some site plans that will give you a sense of options. I would encourage folks not to focus too much on the details of the site plans. Roads and buildings can be moved around, designs can change, but we're really talking tonight about land uses and concepts. So there are a variety of uses that are permitted by zoning, including single-family dwellings, farming, recreation, private schools and colleges, vet hospitals and kennels, bed and breakfasts, nursing homes, ski facilities, and commercial solar. That's about it under our current zoning. And as Valerie noted, the south course is about 150 acres. And several attempts to lay out residential subdivisions on the south course have come to a similar conclusion, which is that there are about 75 or 76 houses that could be built under the south course under current zoning. So remember that number. This is what a standard subdivision, standard residential subdivision of 76 lots would look like on the south course. Pretty much all of the land is laid out into lots with a few small areas along the river that are left as open land. And our zoning and subdivision regs also allow what's called planned conservation development, or PCD development. So in this type of development, the size of the lots is reduced, and the land not contained in lots is provided as open space, which can be public or private. Most developments in Stow are currently planned conservation developments. So this is what a PCD of 76 lots on half-acre lots would look like. You can see about half the land is carved up into lots, about half of the land is left open. The PCD bylaw also allows some units to be reconfigured as multifamily dwellings. This plan does that with 51 single-family homes on half-acre lots, 17 multifamily dwellings down at the bottom of the plan, still a total of 76 units, and then 9 holes of golf remaining in the open space. And finally, this one, it's a little hard to see, but it's a bit of a hybrid. So this has, again, 76 units, but with 62 of them in a PCD development, and then 14 frontage lots along Randall Road that are 1.5 acre lots. These are essentially all of the options, all of the residential development options that are permitted by our current zoning. If this is what we want, we don't need to change anything. What else could happen? A multifamily development could be proposed on the land, either through 40B or by a zoning change. This site plan shows 252 multifamily dwellings, of which 25% are affordable and the remainder are market rate. The plan depicts 9 three-story buildings with 28 units per building. However, other styles, and that's the apartment building on the bottom right as an example, other styles could be built, like these townhomes in the middle at Villages at Stow, or more sort of typical condo-looking development. I meant to take that slide out, sorry. Another option that might have a similar form to the multifamily example is another active adult neighborhood development, or AAN, such as the town has at Arbor Glen or Regency at Stow. These could be single family, as in the bottom right. They could be attached wall construction, or they could be more of an apartment style building. This would require a zoning change to expand the areas where AAN development is permitted to include the golf courses. And it would also require the town to vote to lift the current cap on the number of AA units permitted in Stow, because we're currently at the cap. There are a number of developments that have been built in nearby towns that are called cottage communities. These tend to be higher density. They tend to be smaller units that appeal to those that are downsizing or want a smaller house. So this slide has a couple of examples, one from West Concord, where you have 13 units on 3.7 acres, 50% open space, fairly small development. Slightly larger project in West Newbury, 36 units on 26 acres. And then an even bigger project in an old cottage community called Summer Village at the Pond in Westford, which is 276 units on 159 acres. So something similar to the size of this property. Some have advocated for the town to consider changing zoning to allow a continuing care facility in Stow, so that Stow residents and others can sort of graciously age in place in Stow. There are a number of continuing care facilities in some of the communities around us. These are typically larger developments that have a combination of independent living, assisted living, rehab, and nursing care with on-site facilities and services. So these might have something like 10 to 15 units per acre. This is an example from Hingham, where we just superimposed the site plan on the golf course. But then a more real example from Lincoln. Some of you may have seen the commons in Lincoln from Route 2. That is 259 units on 30.9 acres. And then finally, in terms of development options, might be mixed-use development that could provide for one or more types of residential development combined with small-scale office and retail establishments that are designed to serve both the new units as well as some of the surrounding areas. This is an example of a development called Red Brook in Plymouth. And then there's also the 129 Parker Street development project in Maynard, which was the redevelopment of a 58-acre site. I'm going to go back to the first one. Here you can see that there's mostly sort of typical subdivision houses, but then they're clustered around a village green and some small commercial buildings like the one up on the top left. Lastly, I wanted to touch on the municipal purchase option. As Valerie noted, all 3 golf courses are currently in Chapter 61B. And so unless something changes, the town is likely to have the opportunity to match an offer to purchase and exercise its right of first refusal. If we wanted to purchase all or a portion of the land, we could approach the owner about doing so in advance of that opportunity as well. We have community preservation funds, which could be used for affordable housing, open space and recreation, and historic preservation. The total current balances in those funds is somewhere around $4 million, so not as much as the assessed value of the properties. And we know that we have other calls on some of those funds as well, other projects that are in the works. Why would we purchase the land? Well, we might purchase the land if we wanted to run a municipal golf course in Stow. The town of Maynard did this in 2012 when it used CPA funds to purchase the 9-hole Maynard Country Club, and then they leased it to a management company to operate. The first step in doing that, aside from deciding it was something we wanted, would likely be a feasibility and market analysis to see if it could work. We also might purchase the land if we wanted it for another municipal purpose. The town of Middleton did that with a golf course in 2019 and is currently in the process of developing a master plan for the land. In their case, they were looking for land for a police station, fire station, and town hall complex. In our case, municipal uses might include affordable housing, recreation fields, trails, river access, and other purposes. So we're not here tonight to advocate for any particular combination of these uses. I guess we encourage you to think of them as a menu of possibilities. And there may be other things that we haven't thought of. Importantly, you don't have to pick one thing off the menu. We used the South Course for our example, but there's another 250 acres of land to the north at the north course and Butternut, offering both the challenge and the opportunity to combine uses over a large area in the heart of Stow. And this is just the last slide that shows, again, all three. I'm going to hand it back to Valerie. Jesse?
All right. Thank you, Kathy. So my name is Jesse Stedman. I'm the town planner here in Stow. And we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the considerations and the types of things that we think about when we're entertaining this kind of project. And so we've got a few different, folks that'll talk tonight. Representative of Stow Affordable Housing Trust, our fire chief, and Kathy will talk a little bit about the Conservation Commission, their role in this. So, you know, when I think about Stow, this has been the golf courses are probably one of those defining pieces of Stow's identity more than any other. When I tell people, I grew up in Connecticut, when I go back home and I tell them where I work, they say, oh, you must ski all winter. And then when I tell them it's in Massachusetts, it's often people will say, oh yeah, the golf courses. And so, you know, this is very much kind of ingrained in Stow's history. So entertaining this kind of planning process, one of our roles here is to kind of keep the discussion going, to kind of facilitate this as we move forward, figure out what voices aren't in the room, especially as we kind of go along in the planning process, and then figure out, you know, is there information that's needed, you know, as we start to kind of boil down what does the future look like here, whether it's at our Stow's golf courses, whether it's in Gleasondale Village and in other places that we've talked about and worked on, who is the person or the firm or whoever that can give us that information and can kind of help us over the hump to understand something a little better. So that's a little bit about what the planning department and the planning board do. You know, obviously the planning board is very intertwined with this as well. You know, our master plan goals going back, you know, I guess decades now, really focused on the golf courses. And one of the big takeaways, one of the big recommendations was to implement a golf course study. Well, we feel like this is kind of the very beginning of that. That can mean a lot of things, but you know, trying to understand what does that future look like. And I think part of it is just coming to the realization that whether it doesn't matter how much we value the golf courses, we recognize that in some ways we have limited ability to kind of direct that future, and in some ways we have a big chance to be proactive. I think everybody here has read papers and seen towns throughout Massachusetts that have had a big project come up that maybe came out of the blue and really riled the town up, and folks, you know, it was a very reactive thing. Well, you know, that does happen, but what we're hoping that we can kind of have some of these discussions up front and really think about what is that preferred future look like. And I think really importantly is to kind of provide some direction to the landowners themselves. This is the discussion that the town has been having. These are the things that we care about. These are the kinds of proposals that have been met with, you know, that people have preferred over other ones. And I think it's just a way to be transparent and to be, you know, out there with the kinds of things that are important in Stow. So a lot of these goals have, you know, have kind of reflected that importance over time. So we, you know, in the planning department, whenever we're talking about kind of a future use or a neighborhood plan or something, we think about what are the types of smart growth principles that could potentially be utilized. What about the diversity of housing that we know study after study that we're looking to increase? And in this instance here, in regard to the golf courses, this idea of establishing kind of wildlife habitat corridors. The open space and recreation plan also, this was a recent plan I think that was done now just a year or two ago that was finalized? 2016, okay. Time flies. They also, that plan, the open space and recreation plan also had similar types of recommendations, this idea of kind of pre-planning for some of the priority protection areas to kind of outline up front where areas that could be preserved or maybe had a higher wildlife habitat value or higher ecological value. Where are those spots on these properties? So this is definitely the beginning, but something that has been in the works for a while. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that it's rare, I guess, for us to really come across a property or a set of properties, a part of town as vast as this, and right in the middle of town, I think 400 some odd acres we had just heard, all in the residential zone, this is, we kind of see this at least at the very beginning, is that we talk a lot of times about balancing uses, and certainly we've tried to do that over the years on different projects. But this project, this site, just the size of it alone allows maybe for some creative thinking about, does it have to be all one thing in the future? If maybe it stays golf, maybe it's part development, part conservation. There's a lot of different scenarios just due to the size of the parcels that we're talking about. So this is a good time to kind of be thinking about what could some of those scenarios be, and then certainly in future conversations figure out, is there anything that can be balanced together? What could possibly work? What wouldn't work? So those are the kinds of things that we are typically thinking about in the planning department. And like I just talked about earlier, the last thing is this idea of really being able to act proactively. So we're happy that everybody has showed up tonight. I'm certainly happy to see a lot of faces that folks I haven't met before. So we thank you again for coming tonight. What I'm going to do is kind of send it over to our chair of the Stow Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, Mike Kopczynski, who's going to come up from the back. And the next few folks are going to talk about some considerations that are a little more specific to the type of work and planning that they do. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Jesse. I have no slides, so I'm just going to try to talk as briefly and as to the point as I can. So the Affordable Housing Trust in town, just a little bit about that for those who don't know. It is a committee of the town, but it's set up to specifically advocate and spend all of its funds, can only be spent on affordable housing. That doesn't mean we can't make investments or we can't buy land, but the proceeds of all of those investments or whatever happens needs to be used to advocate for and hopefully develop affordable housing. The few years ago, the Board of Selectmen has asked us to consolidate a number of, this was quite a few years ago now, consolidate a number of different housing groups into one, and so we've taken on the responsibility not only for managing the funds in the trust, but also for kind of managing the information and kind of being the clearinghouse, I think was the term that the Board of Selectmen used at that time, for all the housing issues, to be able to clarify, keep everything straight, and be able to advise the board and advise other committees about housing issues. When you hear about the 40B developments and such, there is a number that the state places at 10% for the 10% of the total units, housing units in town. If over 10% of those are deemed affordable by an arcane federal formula, which is essentially 30%, the people shouldn't spend more than 30% of their disposable income or their full income on their housing. And that becomes an issue in certain towns when you're close to or just below the area median income, which we are kind of gathered each state is broken into different regions. We're part of the Boston group, but if we were in Bolton, we would be part of the Worcester group. But in this area, so our median income is about, I think it's about $88,000 per family now for the AMI. What happens if you're at less than 10% is that there are fewer constraints, and developers can apply for a comprehensive permit that allows them to stretch certain of the zoning requirements, not anything for like Board of Health, not for safety or health or those types of things, but for instance density or setbacks or those types of things, and allow more units that would be available by right to be able to be built in a plan. There's still a permitting process, as we know that those sometimes can be contentious, but and it's no guarantee, but there is that other avenue available. So right now, the number of housing units in Stow is about 2,500. So our 10% number is 250. We have around 190 units right now of affordable housing, and so we are about 60 short. But as soon as the 2020 census that we hear so much about lately, as soon as that is finished, that number will go up, because that number, the 2,500, is the number of housing units that were from 2010. So that number will go up. I don't know exactly what the number is, but probably by 100, 150, so the number will get even higher as soon as the census is completed and HUD gets around to saying what the number of units are in the town. So it's really unrealistic to think that by doing small ownership developments that we can build 60 units of affordable housing. It's very expensive. The average price in Massachusetts for building an affordable unit is $330,000. That's almost mind-boggling because you say, well, you can build a pretty nice house for $330,000, except that construction cost is only a small portion of that. There's carrying costs and there's other costs. So, for instance, the ones, the fairly large developments that we've had in town, like Pilot Grove, for instance, the average was just about that. The average price for all those units was about $330,000. So there's a lot of other costs that go into site prep and financing. There's a lot of costs. Anyway, so just to realize, just in terms of, and a lot of that has to be subsidized. About half of that number would have to be subsidized for an affordable house. So the town just doesn't have those funds to be able to do this. So realistically, 40Bs are how, working with a developer to develop a 40B development that the town could not only tolerate but possibly even be proud of, and also would be able to build more units than we can afford to build on our own, is a realistic way of approaching the 10%. And as I hear, so I won't speak for the trust right now, but for myself, I look at the opportunities with the golf courses as if we were to be able to do something creative, some sort of mixed use thing that allowed us to do enough units that we could get over our 10% with the first development of these, that would give us a lot more leverage for the other ones. And that's just that's my personal way of looking at it. It's just a, philosophy is that if the first mover would have an advantage in that case. One of the quirks of a affordable, about 40B law is that for ownership units, only 25% of the total, so let's say you're going to build 100 homes, only 25% of them need to be affordable, and then you can qualify for the comprehensive permit along with everything else you'd have to do. But if it's a rental, that's for an ownership. But if it's rental, if 25% are affordable, then the whole development counts. So if you only have to build 25 units of rental properties, if that whole development then would count if you had 100 units. So that would be a realistic way. It's a way that the state has made to leverage, because there's not enough rental, and particularly in Metro West, there's not enough rental properties for the demand. It's one of the ways the state, many years ago, tried to encourage building of more rental properties and more rental developments. So you could potentially, and there's a magic number of about 50 developers will not look at a development that's under 50 units for rental. It's just not economically feasible. But from 50 on up, there's possibilities there. So I don't advocate for that. I just point out as one of the options that would be able to that would serve multiple purposes. I think that we've had an example recently of a property that we bought with we've had a affordable housing trust along with conservation, and have bought the property on Red Acre Road, and we're looking at that as a model going forward in the future in terms of being able to work at multiple needs of the town. And one of the other advantages of that property is that there's a possibility of, for instance, like a municipal well that could be placed on the property that would. And so I think it's a great example of being able to meet a number of needs of the town in a single project. And not every need is going to be addressed in every project, but I think it's a good example. It shows how it can work if people are pulling in the same degree, and with the idea that is Jesse had mentioned and Valerie mentioned about being proactive. We'd have the possibility of kind of thinking ahead about what, in particular areas of town, what those needs would be and how we could balance those. I love the idea of doing some sort of mixed retail, light office, housing, and conservation in this kind of large space. It just makes sense, and it fits in. To me, it fits in with the character of the town. So that's Jesse is pointing to me. There we go. Thank you, everyone.
I don't have any slides either, so mine is fairly quick, as long as I don't go shutting off their slideshow. Be real quick. I kind of wanted to bring up a couple points. I've been working with Jesse and Valerie and a few of the other projects in town, and one thing that I wanted to just get across is recognizing the impacts, and as the town moves forward and some of the impacts that whatever the developments are that are going to go in will have on some of your services. Some of them are known. When you put in road mileage, you're going to know how much more snow plowing they're going to have to do and how many other infrastructure pieces are going to be needed. But public safety is a very difficult piece to really understand what the needs are going to be. We have a lot of options out there that we can do some research. When you looked at that menu that was put up there earlier for the options, if you looked at it, there's communities around us that have these things. When they spoke of Lincoln with a building, or Maynard, those communities will give us an idea of what sort of numbers we're going to be looking at on the EMS and fire side for responses. So we do have some sort of an idea. There is some research that can be done and some numbers, but as everybody knows, anything can happen in emergency services. It can go any direction. So I just had a couple statistics that I wanted to kind of throw across just to give everybody. The key to it is no matter what goes in there, your fire department is going to adapt to the response to whatever it is. We have a pretty solid code enforcement system in place that will not allow anything to go in that is going to be dangerous to what's going on around them. We advocate very strongly for the residents in that. But just to give people, because a lot of people do not realize some of the numbers for like the developments in Stow that are already in place. Meeting House, the peak was actually last year. We had 74 calls to Meeting House. So there's, when we look at some of the unit sizes, building sizes, and those are a mix to medicals, fires. I didn't have it all broken down. These numbers I can get, but I didn't want to try to get too specific. I just wanted to give some ideas. Actually, I clumped in Meeting House, Warren Road, Plantation, Arbor Glen, and Grove Hill, because those were ones that we were actually running numbers on over multiple years. Actually, I have it all the way back to 2006 for some of them, up until they were built for those. Last year, we did 190 calls, and it's 249 units. And those are a variety of 55 and over, single family, multifamily, like the Meeting House, similar to the Regency with 1 and 2 and triplex and duplex style homes. So those are some of the numbers. What my biggest thing, let me see. Oh, and the other thing that I just wanted to mention when we're talking residential, smoke detectors. I'm sure anybody that has a newer house realizes in your mind, there's probably way too many of them. And there is. We don't write the code. We enforce the code. We follow the code. But I can firsthand, after 33, 34 years of being in the fire service, they truly have changed how our operation goes. We're not dealing with full-blown fires like we used to be. We're now going to small room fires, room and contents fires, smoke fires, getting a lot of what we call would almost be a false call, but it isn't a false call. It's something that tripped. But the average 2,500 square foot home, 3,000 when you're talking about, say, that 70 unit normal, that's 12 detectors per unit, so you're per home. So there's some of your numbers. You're looking at 800 smoke detectors, 800 and change. So those are all things that we go out on calls. Just to give you a really fast outline for our department, we are guaranteed in the building 24/7, 2 people. So that's the department. We have a very robust call fire department that comes back and responds, but there is a delay. They will be there, but it's guaranteed that we have 2 people. Those 2 people are also the ambulance, and they will transport. So if they go out of town to the hospital, the time that it takes for people to come back, and if they do come back, certain times of the day, it's very difficult. But these are things, like I said, these are things to just keep in mind as we're looking at these developments and these bigger numbers. There definitely will be an impact to the fire department. Just about anything except for open space that was put on that list, there will be something, and I just felt like it was important. I was speaking with Valerie and Jesse that we just at least let the people know, so this isn't something, deep into this planning phase, and all of a sudden, the fire department says, we might be looking at having to add people because we're going to add, on average, this many number of runs or these type of things. So I just feel like it was important to just kind of have this out here so that everybody can digest all the information while they're looking in this early in the process. And I think that's about it.
Real quick question, what would require a ladder truck?
Nothing would require a ladder truck.
Good.
A different question. With this kind of developments, is there need to put in fire hydrants?
No, there's no need to put in fire hydrants. Any development that goes in, we will be requiring them to put in cisterns. To the, any subdivision in town since I think 2001 has been required to put what we call a cistern. It's a water supply. It's an approved insurance safety standard water supply of over 30,000 gallons within 1,000 feet of every structure that they're building. So if it's a 2,000-foot long road, we're going to have probably 2 or 3 of them in there somewhere along the line, strategically placed. Our system is designed, the way our operation is designed, it's to draft the water out of them and utilize it. That's the vehicles we have over there. That's the way our personnel works. It's efficient the way it is, and it's very relative to the ladder truck concept. We're labor intensive to move water. We don't have the time or the manpower to put a ladder truck in the middle of the mix. If you try to put it in after you move the water to the fire, you've got too much equipment in the way. So the ladder truck is rendered useless because it can't get near the building. We have very robust mutual aid with our neighboring communities. They give us a ladder truck when we need a ladder truck. And vice versa, we have a tanker that most of these communities don't have, and when they get a brush fire out in the woods, they're calling us. So mutual aid is still mutual. A lot of people get concerned that we're just relying on someone else's ladder truck. No, it's essentially the way our operation is designed.
Great, and I'm going to wrap up with the Conservation Commission's perspective. So as Jesse noted, planning for the future of the golf course parcels was one of 4 priority needs that was identified in the Open Space and Recreation Plan. And this effort is a priority, working with the Planning Board for the Conservation Commission over the next year as well. The Open Space Plan took a first cut at identifying significant resources on all of Stow's golf courses, and then the Open Space Committee has been doing some good work since that time, working to refine the maps. This map that's up on the screen is the original map from the Open Space Plan that shows the 3 golf courses. And some of the priority resources that were identified include prime agricultural lands, which are shown in purple on the map and are actually fairly extensive on the golf courses. The rivers and the shoreline areas, Elizabeth Brook, Wheeler Pond, the Aspet River, the scenic views from the surrounding roadways and from the Aspet River. The opportunity is there to provide open space in what we call the underserved area of Southwest Stow. So long ago, and I think 2 open space plans ago, we kind of divided the town into 4 quadrants and realized that 3 of the quadrants have some very significant conservation land and open space resources, but the southwest quadrant really doesn't, and the golf courses are in that. There is an opportunity to provide water access to Elizabeth Brook and to the Aspet River, which we don't have very well on those stretches of the river. And one that I think is intriguing is the opportunity for a north-south shared use trail that could parallel Gleasondale Road and provide a safe alternate walking, running, and biking route to being out on Gleasondale Road. And then lastly, the opportunity to provide active recreation fields to relieve stress on the existing recreation facilities and on land that much of it is topographically suited for that purpose. So with all of that said, while portions of the land are important for conservation, in my opinion, I think that there are likely higher town open space priorities from a habitat and conservation land linkage standpoint. So when I think about these 3 golf courses, and this is just my opinion, I guess I would encourage us to think about strategic conservation, protecting the open space and recreation portions of the property that are most important rather than the entire golf courses. And I know that some of the Open Space Committee and Conservation Commission members are here tonight, and I know we look forward to working collaboratively with the Planning Board as this effort moves forward.
All right, so at this point, we have completely inundated you with a lot of information here about what we know right now about the golf course parcels. And I know that you're about also to get into these visioning activities that we have. And so we really do want to hear from you what your concerns are, what you're excited about, what you want to preserve, what you might want to change. But before we get to that point, I just want to ask if there's any context here that we've missed. Is there something about the golf course parcels that we haven't discussed tonight? Sure.
Yeah, so in terms of the ownership, have there been substantive indications that the intent is to sell the golf courses? And if so, what is the time frame?
Sure. So the question was about whether we've heard about the intent to sell any of the golf course parcels. So I think I can say that we know that at least one of the owners is serious about selling at least one parcel of the course. I don't know exactly what the timeline is that I could share, but that's definitely part of the impetus to have this discussion now, while we can still have a proactive conversation.
I think that would be the driving range, Stow Acres, right? Up on the, and that, right? Is that
That's
correct?
right. Yeah, and we've also, we've known that there's interest in, I believe, the north course of Stow Acres as well.
But nothing is better than farms.
I mean, I personally haven't heard anything, right? So, Don?
Yeah, I'm Don Hawks. I'm liaison to Municipal. I haven't heard anything about impacts on schools. I think it's a key piece that may inform some of our decisions, whether they're zoning decisions or negotiating some sorts of things out here. We can't ignore the elephant in the room. If you need to, for each of these things that you look at, unless they're straight AAN, you need to have somebody from the school department and a liaison with them to coordinate a better informed discussion.
Thank you. Yes. So the question was about our inclusion of information regarding the schools in Stow. And I'll say that it's definitely our intent as we continue this process to look into that more. That's definitely something we'll need to investigate, and that will be part of our next steps. So again, this public forum is our first for the golf course parcels. So we'll continue to look into that and hopefully have more information at our next forum.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mark.
I'm a little confused. If we've got a 5 parcel unit for sale at a driving range, is what I'm understanding, that's what the sign says. Are we forcing the golf courses out by giving them suggestions of, gee, this is a good idea, you can make a ton of money by putting 70 units in there or 2,000 units in there, depending on what you can do. Is this putting a light in their head saying, well, gee, Stow's not going to be noticed for these golf courses anymore. We'll just use the Apple Watches and load it with a bunch of people.
So sure. So Mark's question is about are we giving owners ideas, right? And so we are working in collaboration with the owners. So hopefully we are able to develop that shared vision. So that's not only with residents, with members of town boards and committees, but also with the owners to make sure that their interests are heard as well.
Bob McDowell from Gleasondale Road. I'd like to see, or I hope that the Board of Health gets involved in these fairly large projects, or even small ones, because we all have wells. We depend on groundwater for our water supply. We use bottled water, a lot of people use bottled water, but basically there's a tremendous amount of good quality water under Stow. These large open space parcels, in addition to providing recreation, scenic beauty, historic preservation, and so forth, help in maintaining good quality groundwater. As we develop more and more, each home is going to need septic and well water, and the Board of Health has standards for separating these two features for protection, but I think that they need to be somehow at least queried or plugged into this whole process, maybe helping in choices. And also, that's a value, you know, the historic value, the scenic value, but also the groundwater value is another value.
Sure, absolutely. So the question again was the protection of the groundwater and our local wells. So I'm going to put that in the category of something to add to the visioning activities. And so we definitely will, again, get the Board of Health involved, just as I was saying, we'll get the school committee involved. So I think that we should move forward and go on to these 4 stations that we have around the room. So we have, I'll try to describe where things are located and what types of activities we have. Just to my right over here, we have all those photos on the wall, so that's what we're calling development preferences. So we're getting into the visualizations of your interests and selecting from the images that you might prefer to see. In the back corner over there, we're looking at asset mapping. So what do we know right now of the golf courses? How do you currently interact with those sites, and what about them do you currently value? Towards the door here, we have a few different written surveys, so asking you to complete a few different prompts that we have over there. And then just over here, we're looking at year 2040. So what, in your best case scenario, what do these sites look like 20 years from now? So feel free to move about the room as you wish, and take as much time as you want at different stations, depending on what your interests are and where that might lead you. Thank you.